Hello and welcome to another episode of Cognitive Dissidence with me, Niall Murphy, and here I am recording this on the 20th of September 2025. And for those of you who saw the last episode, this is going to be this is like a serious sort of aftermath fallout jobby. Yeah, how to say, I kind of feel like I've come to a bit of a sort of disagreement with someone that I've known for a very, very long time. And in the last ditch attempt to try to have a conversation with him about stuff, I kind of feel like he won't listen. I kind of feel like all I get is I have one point to make, and he has 52 what about this, what about that to to put in my way as obstacles, which means that I cannot have this conversation with him. However, I do have the decency to say that I'm sorry, that I made our private conversation public, and I hope that apology will be accepted. And also I will say sorry that I put you in the same bracket as Bob Villain. If you were not happy with that, then fair enough. And if you don't associate with him, then kind of I think better of you for not wanting to associate with someone like Bob Villain. Fair enough. But there's an inroad there, because as far as I'm concerned, Bob Villain is the person that I will choose in this context to say he is an example of the bad turn that the left has taken. All of the music festivals now in the UK have been taken over by these crazy activists that are preaching hate and death to this and death to that. We used to have music. It used to be about music, it used to be about art. Now it's just about, God, over the years, what to say, talentless, useless cretins who can't sing and can't play, from Stormzy to Kneecap to now Bob Villain, or what's his name? Pascal Robinson-Foster, or is it Pascal Robinson merely a dash Foster, because he's probably not that posh. Right, there you go. And the other thing that recently that happened that I found out was that the president-elect at the Oxford Union for the Debating Society, who incidentally is a diversity hire, got his position with 1A and 2Bs. You're supposed to get a AAA, but they decided to lower the bar to let him in for the sake of diversity. A man who lost a debate with Charlie Kirk, then started celebrating gleefully the death of Charlie Kirk and started laughing about it and saying, let's fucking go, right, on X. And even decided to do a talk where he was justifying political violence against an opponent for whom you have irreconcilable differences with. And no, absolutely not. You don't go there. That's just the wrong thing to do. And I feel like I have irreconcilable differences with this mate I've known for years, and no, you just don't do that. It's just, I suppose, that like if there are ideological incompatibilities, the only thing that can be done is to just peacefully let go our separate ways, and that's all we can do. What else is there to do? There's no point fighting people over it, is there? But, so I would like to talk about the last ditch attempt I did at trying to have a conversation with my friend, who I don't know wants to be my friend anymore, and of course the what about obstacles that he put in the way. So I didn't even get a chance to start talking about these things. So I'll say this on this video, and I'll talk to you, my audience, and you can listen instead, right? It all started, I don't know, for me, I don't know about for you, but in my research, when I think back, you remember Brett Weinstein, and of course his wife Heather Heying. I don't know if you ever watch their videos. I still do on the occasion, right? They were a couple of progressive, university teachers, lecturers, professors, whatever, at Evergreen College in Washington State, near Seattle, not a million miles from Seattle. And when they were teaching, I don't know when this was, about a decade ago, when they were teaching, there was this tradition that existed in that college, And I don't know if it dated towards slavery or Jim Crow laws or segregation or whatever it was. But in the modern era, in the aftermath of the 1960s, there was this rule, there was this tradition that existed now, that on one day of the year, the black students and teachers could take the day off if they wished to. This was like a kind of a peace offering to them. And what happened was that the black students decided that they were going to turn the tables around. This was at the start of the whole social justice warrior thing, right? The black students decided not only that that the white people needed to take the day off as a kind of, payback for them being able to take the day off, but this wouldn't be voluntary. This would be mandated. And the black students decided that all the white professors, all the white teachers, and all the white students must not come in under any circumstances whatsoever. Now, Brett Weinstein just assumed that this, was going to be voluntary because that's how it was with the black students, and he didn't think anything of it, and he came in. Now, he didn't say anything or do anything that was considered to be right-wing himself. All he did was go in and teach the class because he liked teaching his class, only to find himself in a situation where he was under threat, running through a car park trying to avoid being beaten up or lynched by his students. Another more senior professor was in there, was being held hostage, humiliated, not allowed to go to the toilet by the students, things like that. And they were just all standing around him mocking him. And I've seen the videos of this, it was absolutely embarrassing. It was just so wrong. And, this is the thing about it was, of course, is that, Brett Weinstein was not, he was not on the right. But this is how he was treated, just purely because of a sort of identity politics thing. And this was before Black Lives Matter even turned up. Around about a similar time to that, I don't know if it was before or after, the Canadian government were going to bring in a rule to say that you had to use, I don't know if it was it in a state, Ontario, and was it in college or was it just generally out everywhere? I don't remember what it was. But there was a rule that was brought in. It was Bill C-16, that's it. So it basically said that if there were any trans people, you had to refer to them by their preferred pronouns. And there was a fine if you didn't. And so if you got fined for not referring to people by their preferred pronouns, what happens if you didn't pay the fine? Well, then of course, it'd be a crime because you would be done for non-payment of fines. And Jordan Peterson brought this up in a video and said that he was not going to comply to this rule because it brought in, for the first time in Canada, compelled speech. Freedom of speech is, first, there's what you're not allowed to say, and then there's what you're not allowed to not say. You have to say. You're mandated to say this, whether you want to or not. Compelled speech. In all of English common law history, there had never been compelled speech, is what Jordan Peterson was saying. And he said that he didn't want to go along with this rule. And then, of course, that went out, and then he became a transphobe. And then before you know it, he's literally Hitler. And of course, with the left, they are pretty dim. Only Hitler is literally Hitler. Everyone else can only merely, therefore, be figuratively Hitler. So, the Trump, Jordan Peterson, whoever, can only be figuratively Hitler, because only Hitler was literally Hitler. But there you go. And then I remember another college somewhere in Canada, where there was this girl called Lindsay Shepherd who was doing a teacher training course. And she basically showed a panel show from the news as part of her teacher training course. One of the people who was featured on the panel was Jordan Peterson. So as a result of her showing Jordan Peterson in her clip, she was basically dragged over the coals, brought into the principal's office, put on trial, Spanish Inquisition style, with the Witchfinder General. Now, she was smart enough to record this on audio, and she was smart enough to share this with a lot of media. Now, she, of course, ended up being, I think, on, was it True North, which is another one of those kind of non-mainstream, non-woke Canadian channels, similar to Rebel Media, for a little while. And she had her own channel for a little while as a result of the fame that has brought her, but she didn't want to stay doing that. So she didn't. She weren't really cut out to do that. So she went and had a few babies, became a housewife, whatever, and well, kind of hope that she's having a nice life now. But she didn't do anyone any harm at all. But because she showed Jordan Peterson on a panel show in a lecture that she was doing as part of a teacher training course thing, she was treated like, she was basically punished for the crime of heresy. And there were loads of things like this that were happening at that time. And this was all coming from the left. It was all coming mostly from North America, from the United States and from Canada. And this was the whole woke thing that was happening. Got to the point where, Jordan Peterson couldn't do a talk without a bunch of loonies banging on the windows outside shouting. And this got worse and worse and worse. And, as time gone on, there was Antifa, and they were attacking people. Now, of course, because they were called anti-fascist action, therefore they had to be the good guys, because it was in their name. Same with Black Lives Matter. And then Winston Marshall, who was at the time a banjo player for Mumford and Sons, but he was the sort of person who, he'd go on X, or it was Twitter then, before it was X, and he would review books. One of the books that he reviewed was Andy No's book on Antifa, exposing them. Now, because of course, Andy No now, of course, was cancelled, and he was now a Nazi, despite, of course, being of South Korean extraction and gay himself. Everyone's a Nazi who don't go along with, the lefty stuff, and especially if you're an ethnic minority and you're not on the lefty woke plantation yourself, you're an even worse type of apostate. This is how bad it had got. And, there was Black Lives Matter. People taking the knee. Gareth Southgate demanding that the England team at football all have to bend on their knees to Black Lives Matter because George Floyd was turned into a saint. Now, regardless of how George Floyd died and however bad that looked, however bad that was, when it was pointed out that George Floyd was not a good man in life and had in the past put a gun to a pregnant woman's stomach before, right? It didn't matter, because as far as he was concerned, he was a martyr for their cause. And as a result of him being a martyr for their cause, he could do nothing wrong, and there were statues to him. And everyone had to take the knee. And then, of course, in the UK, they'd done this thing now where they had this optics where everyone had been locked down because of COVID, right? And every time there was anti-lockdown protests, well, the police were getting really brutal with them, I tell you. I remember seeing it. Except it was really funny how, the rules relaxed when it came to Black Lives Matter protests. And I remember a scene where there was a bunch of police and there was a bunch of people on the other side of a fence. And they got the 5 or 6 black people that they could find in this predominantly white group of people, and the police were kneeling down in front of them. This was all optics, PR optics. It was all bullshit, really, ultimately, what it came down to. So we've got that. We've got Extinction Rebellion. We've got Just Stop Oil. You've got, I can't forgive them for desecrating Stonehenge myself, But all these lefty causes and all these erosions of freedom of speech, all these police coming around people's houses for the purposes of arresting them or doing them for non-crime hate incidents. To last year in the UK, when Keir Starmer got in, lots of political prisoners, and it just seemed a bit strange to me that all of a sudden, if you don't go by the narrative, you don't comply to that lefty narrative, which is what it is, and you say things that are considered to be heresy on social media, that somehow you can be thrown in with rioters and you can be put in prison. And in the process of you becoming a political prisoner, they'll let other people out, or they'll just give merely suspended sentences, which gives you the impression, at least in the UK, that everything is policed except crime. But all this started from an American form of Marxism, which kind of got to be known as woke. But by the time it had metastasized and spread to the entire English-speaking world, the rest of the English-speaking world, not lucky enough to have anything like the First Amendment, which enshrines free speech into law quite in the same way. So Canadians and Brits and Irish and Aussies and Kiwis, can't just say what they like. Woke gets in. And how did it get in? It metastasized. It started in college with the blue-haired social justice warriors, yeah? It then made its way into the HR departments of corporations. It then made its way into the civil service. And before you know it, it has infiltrated every institution. Right? But no one talks about this who doesn't want to. And a lot of people do not want to acknowledge that this has happened. That the left, in a very insidious and a very subtle way, has basically just seeped like, I don't know, like a cancer into every institution and are calling everyone Nazis and fascists all of the time now who don't go along. Right to the point where I think, well, I must be one myself according to them. Well, what the hell? And I'm losing friends over this now. I'm not mad at him, to be honest, but I am mad at this. I'm mad at whoever is outside shaking the jar is who I'm mad at. And, you know, just would like to point out one thing. The last attempt at a WhatsApp conversation I had with this mate of mine, who probably ain't talking to me anymore, I was trying to begin to explain this to him, that this demonisation of conservative people who were trying to have debates but were being shut down or shouted over, which is what eventually led over this decade to Charlie Kirk being assassinated and a couple of attempts on Donald Trump's life. I was trying to explain the origins of this, going back to Brett Weinstein, you know, going back to Jordan Peterson and the C16 thing, the Lindsay Shepherd, and all of these people who are cancelled, the normalisation of this cancel culture, to finally at last, after a decade of it, people thinking, well, if these people are fascists, then we have the right to kill them. You know, and that becoming normalised and now leading to this. I couldn't even begin to explain this to him because he didn't want to know. All he would say is, well, what about this, what about that? You know, what about school shooters? They're not lefties. Well, I wasn't talking about them. I didn't say that I wouldn't talk about them. I'm not dismissing that this happens, but this is something else that happens for another reason. I personally think that this happens probably because of putting kids on SSRIs, probably because you could be giving them, you know, anti-ADHD and antidepressant medicines or psychotropics medication, which is a new phenomenon which has happened, and that could actually be leading them to that. It could also be somehow related indirectly to the third wave feminism, which is another one of these branches of woke that kind of makes these boys feel like they don't have any chance with women, and it could be that. So I don't know what, I don't know, and I would have to look into it. I'm only speculating. So when you're talking about the school shootings that happen in America, I have no idea. But that's another subject. I'm willing to talk about that in isolation of this, but not at the expense of what I'm talking about. And then he sent me an AI thing which said that he put left-wing murders in America in 2024 versus right-wing murders in America in 2024, and it said that there had been 13 murders in America that had been related to right-wing people and none that had been related to left-wing people, and the source was the Anti-Defamation League. Well, I thought, okay, I'll put that in Grok and see what Grok has to say. It came up with the same result, which goes to show that Elon Musk's platform is not biased one way or the other. But it did also mention that they don't normally, police and authorities don't normally, mention the political affiliations of people when they're reporting these murders. So there could be some bias in it, I don't know. But one thing I do know about the Anti-Defamation League, this is the same Anti-Defamation League that this same mate of mine showed me in a documentary where they tried to do some character assassination on David Icke by trying to ruin his reputation by saying that when he was talking about shape-shifting lizards, he was talking about the Jews. That same Anti-Defamation League that say it's only there's only right-wing motivated murders, not left-wing motivated murders. Well, I couldn't find any other source that had collected or collated that information, and that's my issue here, right? I'd want to be able to probe more deeply into this, because these terms actually are quite abstract, they're quite subjective, you know what I mean. And so, I wasn't actually talking about, who'd murdered who more than the other side. That wasn't what it was all about. What happened was that what happened with Charlie Kirk was a first. It was unprecedented, and that's why it was so shocking, you see. But if it's come to this now, does that mean it will come to this again in the future? Does that mean there'll be a second, and a third, and a fourth, etc., etc.? I would also argue that in the case of left-wing policy, diversity, immigration, mass migration in Europe, which basically comes from socialist policy. It is known to come from socialist policy because every time someone tries to set up some sort of right-wing party, they always refer to them as fascists, which must mean that this definitely comes from the left. Mass migration, which means that from the year 1066 to the year 1950, less people came into Britain than did from 1997 to 2025. We had a fair amount of migration in the 50s and the 60s and 70s and the 80s. But every year now, the migration numbers that are coming in to the UK are more than entire decades of the previous time. And it's the sheer numbers as well of all of that which is causing problems, and people are having problems because it's different. The whole scenario is completely different to the way it was before. The amount of numbers. Getting to the point now where it's not just white flight from the suburbs, it's pretty much flight from the country. I'm one of them. Yeah, right? And one of the reasons why I like being in the Philippines is because it still feels like the Philippines. That they are the majority here. And although I'm, a Johnny foreigner in this place, I actually like the fact, and a bit envious of them, the fact that they still have their own country in a way that Britain doesn't really know anymore. And, you wouldn't call them, who would I be to tell them, to demand to them that they must do things the way I want? Who would I be to tell them to take their flags down and represent me more than them? I'd be wrong to do that. And they don't take kindly to foreigners, not playing by the rules here. And I respect that. I think that's the right way. And being a foreigner and a foreign race in another part of the world, seeing them, having a good sense of their own national sovereignty and respecting them for doing it and not wanting it to be any other way, and then juxtaposing that against what's happening in the UK just baffles me as to why people think the English are racist for wanting the same thing. Some bad habits of mind have formed there, is what I can see. And that's the thing that bothers me. So I got to a point, right, where I have irreconcilable differences with a friend who I don't know is a friend anymore. I mean, I don't want it to get nasty, and I don't really want to, I don't want to say anything bad. I'm not mad at him. I'm mad at the situation. I'm mad at the social engineering that has led to us being played like this. I think it's just so bad. But one of the things that I am sure about is that the left-wing policy that has caused the mass migration to flood the UK and other countries in Europe with lots of, how can I say, undocumented foreign people who are committing crime that the English or the native Europeans are not. Well, there's plenty of statistics to show that stabbings have gone up. Murders by stabbings have gone up, sexual assaults have gone up, theft has gone up, mobile phone snatching, all this has gone up, crime has gone up. But they don't get categorised as left-wing motivated crimes. That's the thing. You look at the Notting Hill Carnival, you can guarantee every time the Notting Hill Carnival happens, there is a murder. Recently there was that Tommy Robinson Unite the Kingdom rally. Everyone behaved themselves. There was, they downplayed and said there was only 100,000, but then the Guardian showed an overhead drone or helicopter shot, and there was clearly more than that. Some people said there was over 1 million, some people said there were 3 million. But it would be a sensible guess to say conservatively that there was 500,000 people there. There were only 24 arrests apparently, and half of those arrests came from the counter-protesters, whose numbers made up 5,000. So, it turns out that the lefties were 100 times more likely to be arrested, right, at the Tommy rally, and there were no murders. You could guarantee, though, if there were any murders at the Tommy rally, they would have said, look, right-wing murderers, they would have said. No one says that about the... No one says that about Notting Hill Carnival. And then, of course, you know, if there are many arrests and there's many things going on at the pro-Palestine marches, no one ever says, oh, these are lefty problems. No, they never say that. So can we trust the people who classify the statistics about left-wing or, you know, motivated things and right-wing motivated? Can we trust the people who write the statistics? Because when it comes down to it, it was the Anti-Defamation League who were the only source given to me by this friend of mine who said that there were 13 right-wing motivated murders but 0 left-wing motivated murders in the United States in 2024. The Anti-Defamation League, the same people who said that David Icke was an anti-Semite because he was talking about the Jews when he was talking about the lizards. Now, I'm sorry, but to me that's a little bit dubious. If there were other, you know, if there were 3, 4, 5 other sources that I could juxtapose one against another, again, you know, these things are, these ideas like, you know, being motivated by the right or being motivated by the left are subjective, they are just very general, they are very, abstract, you know. If you were saying someone was murdered by someone who was black or someone who was murdered by someone who was white, these things are absolutely objectively true because you can see it. But, you know, if you're talking about left-wing or right-wing things, well, you know, these things are just ideas. And the problem that I have at the moment is I do not want to be grouped into any of this stuff. Why don't I want to be grouped into any of this? Because I consider myself to be as close to an ideological agnostic as you can get, a political agnostic. Recently only yesterday in fact, I decided to have another go at the political compass. Now, I'm going to put on screen, this is a blank of the political compass. As you can see, there are 4 quadrants. There's the left libertarian, left authoritarian, right libertarian, right authoritarian. And when I done my questionnaire, it put me right here. I was about as close as I could get to the middle. I was just comfortably in the libertarian bit, but I was crossing over the left and right. Now, I've done this many times, and in the past I have been in other places, but I've always been in the libertarian half, and though I've been on either side of the left and right, depending on how I answer the questions at different times that I've done it over the last 10 years, I've always been very close to the centre. I do not consider myself to be on the right. I don't consider myself to be on the left. To be honest, when it comes to the whole idea of politics and political, you know, left, right, authoritarian, libertarian, whatever, this is what I think about politics. You have to be intelligent and you have to be highly learned to understand the concepts of politics, but you have to be highly stupid to take them literally and believe them. And it's the stupidest use of intelligence that you can basically have. That's how I think about all of this. But if it divides me off against people, and if it means I have to go in one direction, they have to go in another, because people fall for it, then fuck it, man. Fuck it. It doesn't really make me feel very confident about the human beings. It kind of makes me feel that we're not going to make it. It makes me feel that, you know, we are fucked ultimately. And I feel very sad about that, to be honest. You know, we'll just have to see how we go into the future. But I would like to know what you think. Please comment. Please let me know. How do we get through this, man? You know? Oh well. See you later, alligator. See you soon, baboon.